So thanks for joining. We're going to dive in today. We have an exciting session planned. Things are moving at the speed of light right now with AI, as we can all know, and we want to just take us on a little journey and calm our senses a little bit, I think, with all of this, right, Matt?
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
Indeed. All right. So I am trying to drive. I'm Cami Bean. I'm a senior solutions consultant with Kineo. I have been with Kineo for 15 years as of last week. And I've been in the e-learning, digital learning space since the mid 1990s. I'm here to say that we have seen a lot of change and we will continue to see change and we're going to survive it all together. So very excited to be here with you today, joined by my colleague, Matt. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Matt. I lead our learning design team at Kineo, and yeah, I've been at Kineo nearly as long as Cami has here, and in that time seen a lot of change in the industry, and it's a very exciting time indeed.
It's a very exciting time indeed. For those of you who don't know Kineo, we are since 2005, we are a global learning solutions company founded in Brighton, England. So many of you are joining us from the UK. In 2009, I helped start up our US operation. Today, we are 340 plus people globally. We have team presence in the UK and the US, in Argentina, in Australia, in South Africa. We are a truly global organization serving large global clients and smaller clients as well. We do a lot of custom content design and development. We implement Totra, which is a really powerful learning management system and talent experience platform. And we do consulting services around that. We are obviously really keenly paying attention to this whole AI conversation. It is poised to really change our industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and talk about some of what we're coming up against together. So let's dive in without further ado. I will say that the session is being recorded. We will be sharing back out the recording, so don't worry. We are joined by Alex Treasure on the back end. She's going to be piping in with questions, and if there's any technical difficulty, please just give a shout out. And we hope it's a bit of a discussion, even though it's just going to be Matt and I on screen talking, but feel free to throw some comments into chat and we'll try to be navigating that as we go. We have an hour for today. We did do this presentation at Learning Technologies. When was that? A month ago? Just about a month ago, Matt,
Yeah,
right?
about that. Yeah, pretty much
On the
exactly, in fact.
Yeah, on the floor of the expo at Learning Technologies. We did it in half an hour. We'll probably take a little bit more time today and really hope that there's some good conversation going. So let's dive in. Really, there's this moment right now in time as we're all looking at what's happening in AI. And if we saw anybody was paying attention this week, there's been some even more progressive announcements in the last week that have everyone biting their fingernails and going, wow, things are really changing. We want to embrace all of that. We want to embrace the benefits of artificial intelligence, but we also want to make sure that we are keeping the human voice really protected. I will say this for the first time right now and probably throughout this session, but it's all about the people. Everything that we do in training and learning and development is about human beings and people. So as we look at this AI and how it's changing things, we want to keep that humanity in it. So that's really the focus for today. And if we think back to, I see some hearts going up. Yep. Let's take a little tour on the last few years. It's been a crazy time in our world. It was, we all kind of came out of this pandemic. Digital learning was so hot, right? Everyone was going to be moving their curriculum online. Kids were in front of computers taking classes, and now suddenly everyone understood what digital learning was. And it started to seem like things were returning to normal. It was 2022. People were kind of getting back to work, getting back to offices, still working with their kids on their laps, still working from home. Life seemed to be returning to normal. And then it was November of 2022, and ChatGPT and AI and Gemini and all these new tools exploded on the scene, right? And it kind of happened pretty fast, right, Matt?
Yeah, so there was 100 million active users on ChatGPT within 2 months of its launch, which was in November 2022. So that's only 18 months ago. and even since then, we've seen so much expansion and growth in the field. It's like everybody knows about it. Everybody knows about it, and so many people are now kind of using it for so many different things. And it's really got people asking a lot of really quite existential questions about their industry, about their jobs, hasn't it?
Yeah, quite frankly, like panic kind of ensued, right? So, I mean, I think it's still happening. With this week's announcement on the whole multimodal, omnimodal chat GPT, if you were
Yeah,
paying attention, you know, a little bit of hyperventilating into paper bags. This is changing our world. It's kind of as big as the internet was 25, 30, 35 years ago. 1992, we were putting email into place at the company I worked at,
yeah.
and that was hugely transformative, right? We are in a similar transformation. And in fact, we had a little tongue-in-cheek game at Learning Technologies about beating the AI apocalypse, right? Like the robots are here to take over us, and we want to ensure that we're keeping our humanity and all of it. That's kind of our key message. And for those of us who are worrying, like, is my job going to change? Is my job doomed? We don't know the answers. We know that things are changing, and as I said earlier, this is something that we're paying very close attention to because this is what we do for a business as an organization, right? And you all are supporting people in your businesses. How do we ensure that the panic does not overcome us? It's true that things are changing fast. Dr. Phil Hardman did a survey this is a couple of months ago, right? 95.3% of instructional designers who interviewed said they're already using AI in their work. And I guess, you know, hands up, are you using AI in your work? Are you using it officially? Are you using it unofficially because your company hasn't really sanctioned it? I think we're seeing a lot of challenges with the governance of AI and AI tools. And people are using it, people are experimenting with it. We should all be doing that. Yes, lots of thumbs up. And it's just a question of how much you're integrating it and how legal is it within your organization, perhaps, right? So 56% of organizations, according to this Deloitte survey, are using it to improve efficiency and productivity. 23% are creating learning content faster. So we're seeing a lot of pressure on speed. Can we use AI to do what we do faster? And can we use AI to reduce the costs of what we are producing, right? So there's a lot of pressure within internal teams on vendors, which we are one of, right? But let's all take a pause. And I think, really the biggest risk of AI is that it could be making us more effective at ineffective practices. And I've been speaking this in a few places online, but there's a real risk that just because these tools allow us to create more content doesn't mean that we should, right? Are we just going to be creating more garbage, more poor quality training content because the AI tools allow us to do it more quickly? Great, we're just flooding people with content. Is that what we want to be doing? And so, be careful. Tammy says she's worried about reliability. Sure, there's all the risk of there's a lot of risk with AI. And in terms of, is it hallucinating, right? Is it got the right data? Is it secure? Are you protecting your content? Those are all big issues that companies have to resolve. But as learning designers, we want to make sure that we're not just churning out more content more quickly. And as a reminder to us, so Matt and I have been in this business for a long time. In 2005, it was super exciting because all these new authoring tools started coming onto the market, and we had the Articulate Suite for the first time. We had Captivate. These were templated authoring tools that enabled anyone to create e-learning content more quickly. And it was this, revolution. It was democratizing e-learning. We were going to have subject matter experts who could now create e-learning. And that's a great thing. And it also just meant a lot of dumping of content, right? We started to see a lot of poor quality e-learning get created because now anyone could. And interestingly enough, Kineo, we kind of got our start in that market, helping people, helping individuals, and helping companies do more with these tools, because what it comes down to is great learning design. So there was this huge shift. I think people back then were worried that their jobs were going to be at risk, and things were changing very quickly. And we navigated it together as an industry. Organizations changed for sure. And so my cautionary message here is, we've been here before. We've seen sea change. We've seen big transformations, and we will get through this together. Um, and it's not to say that we have all of the answers, but we really do want to embrace the benefits of artificial intelligence, really think about how it can change the solutions we're designing too, not just how quickly we do it and how efficiently and cost effectively. Um, so that's our kumbaya moment. Everyone can kind of take a breath and be mindful together and be like, okay, we're going to navigate this. No cause for panic. Um, so keeping the human in the midst of all of this. This is the real thing, and this is where we don't want to forget about the people. So we're going to take you through a few principles right now and some tips and show some examples as we talk about how do we keep the humanity in digital learning. There's a lot of great questions happening in the chat. If people want to chime in and answer those as you go, I think these are all challenges that we don't all have the answers for, like legislation, risk. This is all happening in real
Yeah.
time. And I think didn't the EU just come up, like the
Yes.
EU regulations just started last week around AI. So
Yeah.
stuff is happening and in place. And it's hard to keep track of for sure. Um,
Yeah, indeed. And some of these things, it's, court cases that are ongoing at the moment that are actually starting to pave the way for some of this. It really is at that kind of early stage where people are asking questions for the first time, and these laws are still being made. So there's certainly an air of kind of treading carefully with some of this stuff, but there's also things that are probably less risky to do. So I mean, the area of risk depends on why you're using it and what you're using it for.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, Graham has an interesting question before we jump into tips. He
mm,
says, Graham Hill, does it become an excuse for people to forego ownership? But I think what you're talking about, Graham, is perhaps the content behind it, right? Like if AI is just creating this content for you
yeah,
or this solution for you, does that kind of mean you can step back and say, well, I didn't do that, not my fault, right? And I think this is where humans come into play, is because we do have to retain ownership of the solutions we're creating, even if AI is involved. There's got to be a human review element. You've got to be vetting what gets produced from AI, ensuring that there aren't those hallucinations, and that the content, in fact, is reliable, regardless of how you're using it. People do not disappear from this equation. And that's the part that we're all navigating together. It's what's going to be my role alongside these tools. And I
mm,
think we do still have to maintain ownership. So that would be something at your organization to make sure is not happening, right? That people aren't just going, AI created it, not my fault. So we're gonna see a lot of focus on that area. So Matt, let's dive in. Uh, if
sure.
I can drive.
So yeah, there's a big question really about who knows best what people need within organizations. There's lots of information and kind of generalizations that AI can give us at the moment. Maybe one day AI will know our organizations and us as people quite well, but at the moment we're not really there yet. And I mean, if we just skip forward, Cami, the answer to that really is that it's the people. And do we ever that we work with, and do we ever want AI to really become our proxy? So do we want to be asking AI questions rather than asking us personally? It's something on a kind of a deeply human level about that. Um, we're still working in organizations. Do we want to be consulted rather than the AI being consulted? So there's a huge question, certainly to me, about how we kind of engage with people within organizations, because I mean, at the end of the day, again, skipping forward, Cami, it's a learner is a real human with real needs, dealing with real people in real situations. And we might even see that definition there of kind of a learner. It might become something that's a little bit different when we've got AI as well. We might have to rethink actually what that role is of people. Do they have to learn everything, or do they have to, work with AI to achieve things in a way where they would have to learn a skill before? So really actually understanding in this kind of new landscape how you know who people are, what their real situations and emotions are is really extremely important.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's been a lot of debate over many years over, like, do we call them learners or people, right? They are
Yeah.
people. We're all people. And well, it's interesting though, because you think about a learner, we talk about having to teach the AI, right? So the
Yeah,
AI itself is going to become a learner.
yeah, indeed.
But we also think about all these new use cases, especially with this week's announcement about the omnimodal ChatGPT 4.0, that it can hear, it can listen, it can look at a document and tell you exactly, right? So using AI in that context as performance support, to your point, like how much are we going to need to learn in advance versus having these tools that help us support performance? And what's the focus going to be? What's the real focus on skills going to be? Is it going to be doubling down more on human skills, on
Yeah.
critical thinking, on interpersonal connection, and uh, as we think about talent development, where are we going to need to focus learning and development activity? These are all questions. I don't have the answer, but I think, yeah, kind of constantly keep thinking who that learner is, and keeping in mind that the human beings there. Um, so in
Yeah.
terms of human-centered design, though, this is like a time to double down on that. And Matt Lineker asks, is instructional design a skill that is at risk, or will it always be essential? Matt and I are instructional designers. We'd like to think it's always essential skill, but I think it's
Well,
going to change because a lot of the tools are going to they're going to start baking instructional design into them. They're not all there yet, but that's going to happen.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that terminology changes as well. We've instructional designers, then learning designers, then learning experience designers, and the industry kind of drifts a little bit between those terms. When actually you're taking on slightly different hats. They're sort of similar shape, but it's maybe a slightly different coloured hat. Um, for these different roles. So it might be that straightforward instructional design. That could be something that AI is extremely good at doing, just giving you instructions. But when it comes to more of providing those kind of deeper experiences, that might be something that kind of focuses us more. So it's more kind of us, I think, appreciating what these new tools can do and us kind of doubling down on those bits where we kind of really, really can bring that extra value.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about human-centered design. What's that, and why does that matter more than ever right now?
So human-centered design is the center of design across industries, really, and it's all about using skills like design thinking to put users at the center of everything. So design thinking isn't where we just kind of come up with an idea and build it. We actually consult the users to ensure that we design for them and their unique situation, as we said before. And places like the Design Council, this is their framework for innovation, which is for kind of driving change. Even that's, driving kind of sometimes, I suppose, organizational change in some respects for this. That's using this kind of process. I mean, they call it connecting the dots and building relationships between different citizens, stakeholders, and partners. And this has this double diamond, which some of you might have seen before, because it crops up quite a lot. It's quite popular, and it starts with that discovery phase. So really kind of discovering the reality. Again, we can keep coming to that kind of like term reality, really understanding what's actually going on, what people really need, and then defining that real problem before developing and delivering a solution. But it's not a one-way process because we have to go back and keep kind of looking at, well, what's changed, what's different? Did we actually hit the mark with what we did before, and keep iterating to make sure that we're actually addressing the real problems that people have there. And yeah, this is central to what we do at Kineo. So highlighted here in the circles are some of the kind of the key areas where we try and bring in that kind of real voice wherever we can. It's not always possible. We know on some projects that it's difficult to get those real learners in, but it's something we really advocate for. So at the beginning, when we're doing our research, speaking to real people, or at least advocates for those for those real members of the audience, and then when we can bring them into those ideation phases and really kind of get them thinking about what solutions might work for them and what can really help them in their role, really helps us to put forward a good hypothesis for how we can kind of like start to address the performance needs that we're looking at. And then that user testing at the end is really super important as well to make sure we've hit the mark. everyone, we look at this stuff every day. We're so close to it. We learn something new every time we put something in front of the real audience. They tell us, they'll pick up on stuff that we never even thought of. Back when I used to do web design, I always used to think that um, people are never going to use stuff the way you intended them to. They're always going to do it their own way, and it's so true. But based on what you find from that, you can decide, great, we've got a fantastic basis to work from here, and we can start scaling up and building on this, or we can revise it. We can go back one or two steps and still kind of go back and kind of get that ideation going and make sure that we're really what we always want to do as learning designers, and that is solving real problems. Not just creating content, but actually making an impact on organizations.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, and Matt kind of brought this up in the chat. He said, I'm just concerned we're going to create more content, right? It's that garbage in, garbage out concern.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think where the shift is going to happen sooner rather than later. This week's announcement about GPT 4.0, I think really underscored that, where we may not need to create content at all. That's kind of my panic moment of like, holy
Mm.
smokes, like you're going to be able to ask AI anything. You're going to have this, chatbot agent that's on your phone, that's on your computer, that's going to be able to answer questions. What do I need to do next? How do I do this? What am I doing wrong? You can imagine that you're out, I don't know, you're working on frontline at a McDonald's and you want to get feedback on if you built the Big Mac correctly, or you're on a telephone pole and you want to see if, hey, I'm having trouble with this wire. Am I doing this correctly? You're going to be able to show a video to your phone, shoot a video, and your phone's going to tell you. It's crazy, right? So are we even going to need to create content? And I think the answer is yes, but it might be more focused on, to Matt's point about experiences, or teaching more the human skills that we're all going to need, right? Everything's changing. It's kind of mind-blowing as we start thinking about the possibilities. So our challenge as learning designers is also going to be to think about different ways, different types of solutions to deliver what people need. And somebody had a question here about analysis. How are you analyzing to identify causes, says Amy. And do you mean cause of the problems, the performance problems that we're trying to solve? I guess I'd need a little bit more content behind that, but performance problems.
Mm.
So how are we doing that analysis, Matt? That's a question specific to this chart, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And we're really happy to kind of talk about what we do with data and measurement kind of separately as well, if you wanted to have a conversation with us about that. We do use analytics and kind of data behind our products in order to get insights from that. That helps the organizations we work with to combine that with their other forms of measurement when it comes to performance as well. Obviously, we can't measure everything within the learning itself. There's stuff that actually happens in the role, but with enough data, you can start to kind of like make connections. But one of the simple things, really, to understand the causes is to kind of ask people. That's one of the missing links. Sometimes it's you can be creating something thinking that it's what people need, when you actually ask people, it's there's a much more fundamental reason why something's not happening. So having those focus groups, speaking to people is really valuable to understand actually what's getting in the way of people doing their job.
Yeah, that's a great point. Getting back into the human beings. I mean, AI may be able to help identify what the performance problems are because it will be able to analyze the business data for sure, right? And you could start figuring out, well, this is the step of the process that everybody gets wrong. So we might be using AI in different ways to look at business data. And I think there's a promise or a possibility, right, that AI is going to be built into our workstations completely. Your OS is going to know when you're doing something wrong. It's going to be able to recommend to you on your computer, like, you're not writing a good letter. I mean, it can already do this right now, right? You already, if you're writing something, you get scores in Word and it tells you if you're, what reading level you're at, right? AI is already there. It's already baked into a lot of what we do, but imagine that that's just going to step up and there will be a lot more proactive identification of what you're doing wrong. whether we like it or not, I suppose. Um, so how do we paint the reality of our learners? This really cuts to the heart of what we were just talking about. How do we get deep into designing experiences that keep that humanity front and center? Um, a lot of it we believe has to do with injecting the voices of real people into your experiences. So that's providing authenticity, credibility. When people recognize that your content is credible, they pay more attention. So we might hear stories where we can say that's a real person sharing their experience, or I know these people, I see myself in these people. Telling those real stories gives it an emotional impact. We might hear a story, we'll see an example here in a moment of a situation where someone gets hurt on the job. That's going to stick, right? Real stories we pay attention to, we are primed to. Humans pay attention to negative stories more than anything, right? So inject that emotional experience, make people uncomfortable in the learning because that's what we're going to remember. And thirdly, it's about relevance, helping people see how this content, how this material is going to apply to the context of their life, of their world. It's all about context. I'm going to use this skill. That's just like my job. I can see myself in it. All really important. So what does that look like? What can that look like in e-learning? Matt's going to take us through some examples right now.
Yeah, so we'll go through a few different levels of how we can do this. So this first example is where we reached out to, or our client reached out to members of their target audience within their business to gather quotes that they could then use to weave into a narrative. So what you hear here is where these direct quotes have then been put into a like a professional voiceover. So it's a professional voiceover. It's not the actual voices of people, but all the content there is actual content that was gathered and real quotes from real people. So if we just have a quick listen to that, Cami.
Put yourself in the customer's shoes. We all know what it's like when our app doesn't work or when we can't get in touch with the bank. It's painful, isn't it?
Go faster and break less. The key is to deliver code more often, but in smaller quantities. That way, the customer benefits from that functionality delivered sooner, with less scope for failure.
And what we did within that was say straight out, these are quotes from your real colleagues. And it's by gathering those quotes, and we've done this in many different scenarios, it gives the authenticity and people are actually learning from their peers. It's still presented in that kind of very glossy presentation that we put forward, but people know that they're not just hearing a download from management. This is really kind of like more ground up kind of community based initiative that they're taking
Yeah.
part in here.
What I like about this approach too, like we're not putting pictures of real people and their names on the screen, because that's always an issue in corporate e-learning. Because what if those people, get laid off or leave the company, right? And then you have to update the course. So there's some anonymity here, but it's also those real stories. You could use AI audio, right? You could use a text to AI voice feature if you were looking for ways to reduce cost, speed, time to market. So there are ways to kind of blend AI with these real voices. I think it's a great example though, because I like how that goes. We'll come back to some of these questions. There's some really good ones, so I'm not going to answer them all right now. We'll keep going with some of these examples, but keep throwing them in, and we'll have a good discussion as we continue. So we've got another example. This is using video. Matt, tell us what happened here.
Yes, and it's using street casting, which here wasn't technically on the street, but street casting, we worked on this with one of our video partners. And street casting is where you reach out to members of the public and get their stories. And then you pick your favorites and then you bring them in and then you film them. So the street is metaphorical. In this case, I think we reached out online for the stories. And the interesting one about this, it was about customer service. So it was for the organization we did this for. It was for people who were dealing with customers. So rather than kind of hear from what the organization kind of considered was good customer service, we spoke to members of the public. That's how we did it here. We brought them in and they spoke about what they really valued from good customer service. So let's have a listen to Georgia's story.
I needed a new pair of boots. I went into the store and I just got so lucky. There was a guy, I remember his name, it was Matt, and he was honestly just an angel. He gave me so much advice, he took so much time. He let me try on like at least 10 different styles, the vegan ones, the non-vegan ones. I ended up going with these ones, and these were about £20 cheaper than the ones I had in mind originally, so it wasn't even about money or commission for him. He was just the most patient guy who helped other people at the same time as helping me, and yeah, I felt really comfortable and really listened to.
So yeah, wonderful customer service story there. And yes, lots of Matts around. So I was not the person in the shoe shop. I'll just clarify that. Different Matt. But just such a kind of a nice idea. And it's so easy to talk about things like customer service as being this kind of theoretical, a kind of abstract concept. So to actually hear from a real person talking about customer experience, even though it wasn't for the organization in this case, this was for a bank, but we were talking about buying shoes. These are kind of universal, kind of human experiences that we can all really relate to, and it's just a great way to bring authenticity to it.
Yeah, and as Ruslan says, sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly, we relate to the girl, right? We relate to Georgia. Like, I think she's adorable. She seems really sweet. She's very sincere. Whether AI models can replace these stories or not, I think they might eventually. I don't know. I mean, AI is getting pretty good. And if we saw some of the demos this week, it's getting better at expressing that empathy. But I think the jury's still out as to whether or not human beings will still feel that connection with those AI models. Or, I'd like to think that we crave real human beings. But that may change in time as the video gets better and the avatars get better and they are able to express emotion. So, I don't know what's going to happen next. So we've got another example here. This is also video. Matt, take us through this one.
Indeed, and this is a really interesting one. This is for Safety On, who are an industry body around safety in the onshore wind industry. And this video is basically about just how accidents can happen and how you can hope to avoid these. This is about someone who experienced an accident. We won't go into detail about the actual injury the person suffered, but we'll get to meet them and hear a bit about their working situation. Yeah, so if we just meet Chaz, and we'll find out a bit more about him and his job.
My name's Charles Hollyman. Most people call me Chaz, and I'm a mechanic on wind turbines. I love being outside. I've always enjoyed being an outdoor worker. Using my hands. I've been a mechanic all my life, so I just love doing that sort of stuff. The weather is probably the biggest challenge. The way it can change so quickly. Extremes, hot when it's hot and cold when it's cold. We're based out of Inverness. We have individual turbines right through to some of the wind farms where we have up to 23 turbines on one site. The job entails fixing faults, carrying out maintenance on the turbines, just keeping them running really. February last year I was involved in an accident.
So we go on to find out about how Chaz had his accident, and we learn about how it's impacted his work life, and we actually meet his family and learn about how it's impacted his life at home as well, and some of the tasks he does on an everyday basis. And he gives us advice about what happened and how you could avoid this yourself. But the interesting thing about this is, one, we really get to know him as a person. We get really engaged in the story, and it's not theoretical anymore. We're actually speaking to someone who, speaking to us rather, that has experienced this themselves, who we really go on a bit of a journey with. We see where they work. If he talks about the cold, we feel that cold. We feel the cold that he feels when he says that. Just telling that story in just a real human way, sharing those experiences, is just really very engaging, and something that's difficult to do with situations that are fictional or manufactured. It's very, and hearing the advice and the safety advice from someone who's been there and has experienced it, it's very different to, again, just getting the list of bullet points that you would see. So this is a really I think your archetype kind of human story that you have here. But Cami, it doesn't all need to be true stories, does it, to be human and relatable?
It does not. And yet super powerful, right? We hear from, what's his name? I forget what his name is. This guy.
Chaz.
Chaz. So Chaz, right? This is, yeah, you really do empathize, and he tells a horrible story about what happened to him, and it hurts, right? We feel that empathy. But we can also do it with drama, by fictional stories. So, but generally fictional stories, you can make up characters so long as they are grounded in the reality of, of reality. We have a client who does every year for their annual required training. They have created, it's a big initiative for them, and it's, mandatory training for 30,000 plus, people. They've created a set of fictional characters who come along to every year's training. They shoot video of these stories. They have become viral. People really identify with the characters of Matt. I'm going to call him Matt. And Elena, and they have taken on a life of their own. It's kind of a viral water cooler type conversation where you find out what's happening with these characters. So you can tell real stories in a fictionalized way. You don't have to use names of real people. If, a lot of companies don't like to do that. We've already talked about that before. But do it in a way that's going to add that humanity, that's telling the story in a really authentic human way, using those authentic situations. And if you're using actors and you're doing video, try to get good ones. I think that does make a difference too. It's going to be interesting to see how AI improves in this space, AI video. And I know tools like Synthesia are really trying to start pushing into scenario. So we're going to see what happens in this space. That might change some of it, but the stories still have to be real and still have to be super authentic. And that will help a lot. Now, a lot of the examples we've been showing here have been video or audio. It doesn't have to be video or audio. That might sound, from a production standpoint, that might feel like too much for you. So here's some examples just to show you that you can tell really compelling, effective stories through text and graphics. So immerse people in the situation, help them identify with the character. So here in this case, tomorrow, you and your team, so this is meant to be you're traveling for an in-person meeting, you've packed for the trip, you're ready to relax. Now we're going to take you through a series of scenarios, situations, and you have to make some decisions, but we've dropped you into the story. This is an old technique. This doesn't go away in the age of AI. I think we still want to immerse people in the stories and in the stories, in the action of the decisions that you're making. That's the dress rehearsal for the human brain that we really crave and we really like. So here's another example. This is, again, was also text and graphics only. So don't feel like it has to be this high-end production value.
Yeah, and there's another type of story that we often forget about, and that's why are we creating this training? What does this mean for the organization? What does it mean for you? What will your life look like in the future? If you do this, what are we all part of when we're sat there going through this content? What does it mean to us? And so that story about behind the learning, behind the change within the organization, the future that we're imagining together, it's sometimes something that we don't really bring to life. We create the content so that it exists in the bubble, but actually, what does it really, really mean to people? And how can we take people along that journey and make them part of that story? So something that we can certainly do more of, that we do sometimes, and it's really, really effective when we do, is to make people a real kind of central part of that change, and someone who's actually part of writing that story in the company as it moves forward, so we can tell a real human story there as well.
Yeah, and Graham, you make a great point. You say Disney seems to have mastered the art of using non-human characters. Didn't The Lion King make you cry?
Yeah,
Absolutely, right? Like great stories connect into what's human about us all. So fiction can tell a really powerful story that somehow connects us to our humanity. And this is a time really for us to double down on great learning design, on the key principles. So Matt Lineker, your question earlier about, what about instructional designers? Are we doomed? Not yet. I mean, I think our role may be shifting, but it's time to double down on what is great learning design. How do people learn? I mean, I think that the core cognitive function of the human brain is not going to change. The tools that we use to help us learn might change, the way we learn in the moment of need and performance support. So I think as instructional designers, we may have to start thinking less about content, and more about experiences and more about how we're supporting human beings through the work that they need to do with learning and development.
yeah.
So we want to double down on instructional design right now, and that's why we are not doomed. I see some thumbs ups. Awesome.
Yeah, something that I always like to think about is that in the future, there's going to be so many things that computers can do, and robots even can do a little bit further down the line. We're going to employ people because we need people, because people bring a quality, a kind of a real need to have humans doing those roles. So I think that's actually quite a positive thing and quite a nice thing to think about, potentially, that we really start to value people as people, not just button pushers or whatever. And there's huge scope again for new skills and new types of experience and new types of culture to develop around that.
Yeah, there's going to be new jobs that crop up too. I think at Learning Technologies, one of the keynote speakers, I can't remember which one, gave an example of a supermarket and how, supermarkets have these self-checkout lanes now, right? Where essentially that's using, I guess, AI, right? It's robotic automation of the task, and you don't have a checkout person to talk to. They found that a lot of their customers really missed having that person to chit chat with, and they now have a chit chat line, and it takes longer, but there's somebody who will actually, their job is to take time talking to you while they're scanning your items. And it's this human connection, and that's ultimately why you're going to want to go back to that store. And I just thought that was really interesting. So we have to, jobs are going to change in the face of all of this, but people will still want that crave that human connection. And I just think that was really an interesting angle on all of this. So we'll come back to questions in a bit here, because I think there's some great ones. There's a lot of potential here, right? There's so much potential. It's happening so fast. AI is changing what we do, how we do it. It's going to change the solutions that we deliver. We know that. There's a lot of potential here. Matt, anything else on that one?
Yeah, I think one of the big things we can do is focus on how do we use AI to create solutions for a pre-AI world. And there's a small window where, yeah, we can create tons of content really quickly and profit from that, we as the world. But that's a small window because everything's changing. What people need, why they need it, that's going to change as new solutions come along. It really is. You've mentioned the internet before. It's like that kind of change. Some people rate it bigger than the internet, but we'll see where it gets to. And really understanding how we can use it to add value and adapt to this new world, and create really good solutions to develop people and improve performance, and really speak to those humans who are kind of within those roles, not focus on them, get used to the AI, get our heads around what they do, but really focus on how we kind of speak to those humans.
Yeah, for sure. And, all of us, be curious. It's not an apocalypse, but it is a huge transformation. So it feels like a big wave right now. We're riding a wave together. The wave formation may be changing as we speak, though, right? Like suddenly a new announcement gets made, and you're like, wait, which I just got swamped. I'm choking underwater now. I've just swallowed a bunch of water. There's definitely moments of that. Donald Taylor earlier this week posted something about, I think he just said, L&D is going to look very different in 5 years. We don't know what it's going to look like, right? But it's going to look different. I think we have to accept that. But think about the internet, that the transformation that had, e-learning authoring tools. We've been here. We're going to do this together, and we're going to figure it all out together. Let's look at some questions now. I think there's been some good chat here, and I want to go scroll through it. Alex, is there anything key that you want to call out that you want us to talk to? Thanks for all the commentary here.
Yeah, great discussion.
I like, Ruslan, I like your comment about e-learning and ultra processed food versus homemade food.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Is there just going to be a lot of garbage in, garbage out? With ultra processed food is all the stuff that gets created by AI. I think that's what you're saying. And, perhaps more quality content gets created by humans. I don't know. I mean, I think the jury's out. We will see high quality content getting created by AI. Let's not deny that. And yet a lot of you are all agreeing, we really do like human beings. We want to talk to each other. Jessica, it was Donald Taylor. He's a big thought leader in the UK. He organizes the Learning Technologies Conference. He's definitely one to follow. Let's see. Matt Lineker says technology is just an aid in some ways to meet and connect people. Right. Right. Here's this webinar. We could have had this webinar done by our AI video robot faces instead and just fed them a script. But that's not going to feel as spontaneous and human and connected. We are having a conversation. AI will be able to do that, though. So everything I say, like, I feel like, well, AI is going to start doing that too. You're going to be able to talk to your AI in a way that we can't even really fathom yet. It's a big change.
Yeah. There was a question earlier on that was around the biggest risks of AI. There's three that do kind of tend to occupy my mind quite a bit. One is the risk of letting it loose on our internal company systems, knowing just how badly kept a lot of SharePoints are. So we do need to do some spring cleaning first. So it's that garbage in, garbage out. If we want AI to really perform for us in organizations, we need to make sure that we give it the best content to work with. That's a big one for me.
So is that whose purview is that? That's a really interesting question, because if you think about, we're trying to teach our AI, we are, we're training the AI based on our internal data. So is that an L&D task? It's not, but I'm being controversial here. I don't know. Whose job is that going to be, to train the AI? And to do the spring house cleaning, make sure that what gets taught of the AI. What do you guys think?
I mean, for the time being, I mean, it's going to get to the point where L&D, where our learners, as you said before, are going to expand to be people and to be AIs in some cases. You can certainly see our industry starts to get into that area. When it comes to actually navigating, kind of generations and generations of documents and, kind of things that went nowhere on intranets, I would say that if AI can sort that out, that might be a sign that it's surpassed humanity. It really could be. I think it's such a big issue for everyone, isn't it? Kind of like making sure that that all that stuff's in good order. But yeah, I think it's certainly a big spring clean. I think the others are the other risks are the ones that we've touched on. It's that we see it as a tool that's simply for creating the same thing that we did before, and not thinking about how people are changing and how people's habits are changing, and of course the temptation to use it as an SME when it might not be 100% accurate every time. I think
Yeah.
that's especially for compliance areas, that's a problem if you rely on it for information that's not correct.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be like big AI, right? There's going to be your operating system AI, and then there's AI built into tools themselves. So, you know, a voice to text in Articulate Storyline, or there was a big announcement this week. I think Articulate's talked about how they're rolling AI in. They did some update this week, and somebody quoted me in the review just about the whole garbage in, garbage out thing, which I thought was interesting. So I think the first wave of a lot of the e-learning authoring tools is going to be, how do we create more content more quickly? So for better or for worse, I saw a demo last week of someone I know in industry who's developing a new authoring tool. And I was like, good luck with that. But it was really interesting what they're doing, because they are really trying to bake in instructional design models into it, feed it your content, and it will create scenarios and stories. So somebody had asked about, Nick, I think it was you asking about, can we replace the focus groups with AI? Maybe. I don't know. It depends on how well the AI has been taught, right? It's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think
somebody I've asked, could you give us your thoughts about copyright issues, restrictions around commercial use of content generated by AI, such as images, audio, videos, audio, and text? Huge landmine area, right? Did anyone see the Scarlett Johansson news this week? Like she's like, so Chat GPT used Scarlett Johansson's voice to be the voice of their demonstrator. She had told them no 2 days before the launch. They asked her again and she said no, and they launched with her voice. And she's now, you know, rightfully so, very upset with them because they're trying to mimic her voice in the movie Her. Yeah, I mean, I think even if OpenAI is making blunders like this, it's going to be rampant. And I do think it's an area of concern. And I think, it's why we're seeing a lot of companies, people want to use AI, but they don't have the governance in place yet. There's still a lot of concern around those risks. So, you know, whose company has a formal policy around AI? Whose company has actually turned on enterprise Chat GPT for them? I'd be curious if we could like do a little panel. So there's, I think, a lot of concerns with that, and we've got to watch that really closely. And it's why you still need humans involved in the equation. Matt?
Yeah, well, it's moving so fast. A lot of this is coming out of court cases. So and there's not been that many so far. So there have been some that have made some, you know, decisions on how that particular judge, I guess, saw it, that have leaned towards you can't copyright it. There was one about that, but that doesn't mean that's where it's going to land. And it's going to be different from country to country as people raise stuff in the EU versus the UK versus the US versus other countries. It can change. What is happening is certain kind of suppliers of services are starting to train stuff on stuff where they've got clearance to do it. So, for example, I believe it's worth checking this, but I believe the Adobe the Adobe AI trains on its own Adobe stock library, for example. So that's cleared. But there's a load of concern from people and creatives where it's just been trained without, it's just been taken off the internet, and that's I think that's still a work in progress for the world. I think it's moving fast, and we'll see where that all lands. I wouldn't like to say where, to be honest.
We'll figure it out. Mary, thank you for sharing those resources. Alex, I know we're almost at time, so I'll let you come in, and I'll just say thank you, everyone. This has been a great conversation, and if we didn't answer your questions, please reach out. Hit us up on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Thanks, Cami. Thanks, Matt. Typically, my Zoom crashed when I was meant to come in and shoot the questions at you both, but it seems like you've dealt with that fine. just everyone will get a copy of the recording. That should be in your inbox tomorrow. And for everyone that's watching the recording who can join us live, hello and thank you. If you do have more questions for us, the ways to get in touch with Kineo are on your screen now. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn as well. And thank you, Cami, and thank you, Matt. Thanks everyone for posting your questions. A lot of discussion in the chat today, as we thought there might be. So thanks everyone. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, stay human.